Alright, welcome to the bench. Today I'm going to show you how I build my coil springs for long travel, like desert suspension. I don't have one that I can mock up at the moment to show you, but this is what I use. This is what I've used before, and I like the way that it works. I've also used this when I build my own like strut suspension and coilover suspension on some of the import cars, and I've also done it on a couple of drag cars, which I'll show you here in a minute. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, I like the solid rod. I believe this is 16th is what I used for that. And then I have some tube that slides right over the top of it. So what I did is I cut two little sections of it. And that's not the straightest cut, I know that, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So I glued a collar down on the bottom side. So this would be your long travel desert suspension for a swing arm style setup. This would mount basically about halfway in the middle of where your hinge point to where your axle is, so that it would have the most amount of movement. You would also have to have a remote reservoir cooling for your oil as well that would be in this shock. This is more the spring side of it. So right next to it you would just run a regular shock, which you can duplicate the same way. I would use a smaller gauge of tube or rod though, and basically you just build it kind of the same way, and you'd build a shock and you just bring your shock down to like your shock body down to like yay, so that you would have that would be your travel for your suspension. But that's for another day and another story. This is how we do this. So take that, and I just glued a piece down onto the end of that so that it holds itself on. I'm going to use this beading wire. I prefer the like anodized look of them. They've got some blues and some greens and some reds that really look really good. Gold is what they had at, and I get this at Walmart. I use 24 gauge. You can use a little bit bigger, so you could probably run up to like a 20 gauge, and it would look a little more like a beefy spring. So one that had less windings overall in it, something that you'd see on a like a 3/4 ton two-wheel drive truck, something along the lines of that. That would be about the gauge you'd need there. This also, I really like it, this 24 gauge, for doing fuel lines. On most cars it actually looks pretty decent fuel and brake lines that you can, it doesn't look too bad. So what we do here is I take a wood screw. It doesn't matter the length. The finer your twist on it, the finer your spring will be. This is just a multi-purpose construction screw style grade based off of like a drywall screw. You just grab a hold of it and you just put your wire in the voids of your screw. Oh, and I screwed that one up there, didn't I? Oh, that's probably because I'm spinning it backwards. Oh, let's start over. See, you got me talking and I completely forgot about how you had to do this. So just bring yourself out another length of it. Harbor Freight, they work really good. They've worked really good for me. So this is the way I had to go to the center sometimes, and then you run it around, then run this one up, and if you run out of space, nope, doesn't look like we're going to on this one. Okay, so you try to pull that there as tight as you can. Then you can just thread it off of the screw and voila, you have a coil spring, which the wood screw to this 1/16 rod slides over there real nice. You'll have to take and pretty it up and move them around a little bit. So that's the one we just built. This one I built a little bit earlier, and I spent a little bit more time on it. So you wrap your base wraps. Let's see if it'll focus there. Wrap your base wraps nice and tight. That's the way a real spring would have been. So then you set it up there, and then you have your cap that goes on top of that. Make that flush. So you could probably use that for a little bit of workable suspension, and it would bounce back for a little bit. But that's how I do my coil springs, and how I make that would be a long travel style suspension for a pre-runner type setup. You just glue the top, and then it would be static there, and it would hold its shape. You'd want to paint your tube probably gray or black, I would think, but you could do it silver as well. When you're doing coilovers on like import cars, you would cut 2 of these and put notches in them so that you'd have your adjustment, and you could do that with these as well. That's how they work. So that's how I do that. Here's a car that I have done that type of a suspension with. This was an old build car that I did in a Facebook build off many years ago, and I basically built, I didn't want to run, it was a straight axle style car, so I built struts for it, which hopefully you guys can see. You can see the red spring there, and I don't know if you guys can see that, but I built my own plate for the top of the strut to go in, because it was a leaf sprung straight axle car, but I wanted it to set a lot lower. This is the Max Rat Malibu or whatever, and that's the way that I wanted to build it to make things work there. So you've got lots of different options that you can come up with. This is the only one that I had that was easy to come by and easy to get out of the case, and don't mind the dust. It's been I've had some home renovation action going. So, but thank you guys for watching, and that's how I do it. And if anybody has any questions on how I do it, or needs to have a little more of a helping hand with it, definitely hit me up, let me know, and I will do the best I can to walk you through of how I build it. I think I actually built my Dodge with these same springs when I did the 4-wheel drive conversion on it. So, but it kind of, let's see if it'll shoot. Yep, it shot pretty good, but it's quite a bit shorter now. So I don't think as an actual suspension it would hold up for very long. But if you had it loose with your setting on it, it would allow the body and the axle to set where it perfectly is. That's the biggest problem that you run into when making a lot of these custom suspensions and stuff like that, is you end up with, if you don't have everything just absolutely perfect on your jig, it'll end up with the tire off the ground. And that's, in my opinion, that should be something that should be fixed right away. But thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.